it's a story typical of many communities in New Zealand, complex and full of controversy. But unfortunately, he and the chief didn't really have that great a relationship. No warning and nowhere else to go. Hi, I'm Justine, the nerdy half of the Breakaway Bravehearts, and today I'm in Raglan, aka Whaingaroa, a town known to surfers, travellers if you're into adventure sports and the beach and just chilling out basically, but it should also be known to history lovers, and I'll tell you why. This area has been populated virtually from the beginning of the human occupation of Aotearoa. Originally the township was known as Putoitoi and the harbour was Whaingaroa. There are at least 81 archaeological sites in this little area, and it dates back to 1400 AD. Okay, that might seem kind of recent to the rest of the world, but that was when humans first arrived here. We are a very new country. Originally, the coast was named Whaingaroa, and this comes back to the story of a Tainui spiritual leader. Raglan was the tohunga of the Waka of Tainui, which had set off with a group of travellers from Polynesia about 800 years ago. They were led by their chief Rotorua and were looking for a place to settle, and were exploring up the North Island's coastline. On their journey, Raglan fell in love with the chief's daughter, Kahukeke, and he asked if he could marry her. But unfortunately, he and the chief didn't really have that great a relationship. There had already been some fallings out over different aspects beforehand. And apparently the chief wasn't entirely over it because he refused and would not give his daughter for marriage. Frustrated, Raglan took off on his own and he fled up the coastline, scarring it as he went, setting off fires and basically trying to make it more difficult for the Tainui Waka to follow him. Eventually the two men did meet up again and they made peace. The marriage was completed, happily I'm guessing. I can't actually find the daughter's account of the whole thing, but if you know her feelings on the matter, please let me know in the comments below. In any case, the two did continue to carry on travelling together, and they named quite a few places up along the coastline, including Whaingaroa, the place of the long pursuit, a nod to Raglan's epic journey and the role the landscape played within it. But now we call it Raglan. Most Māori place names have fantastic stories that tell us about the people who came before us. If you're interested in knowing more, because actually there is a bit of debate around what we call our towns, should this actually be Whaingaroa, not Raglan? I've done a whole video on it. If you haven't watched it already, I suggest you click that, and while you're there, please hit subscribe and the notifications bell. And at this stage, I'm going to say thank you so much to all my subscribers, especially all of you who leave me a comment. I really enjoy just hearing from you, and I love your feedback. Let me know how it's going for you. Typical of the Waikato area, the land here did change hands a few times between different iwi, different tribes. Sometimes this would be in diplomatic ways, so through marriages. In later years, boundaries and chiefly authority started to be challenged, and this was particularly common in the years in the lead up to full colonisation. By the late 18th century, Ngāti Mahanga occupied the area around Raglan. This was one of the earliest spots of European settlement in all of Waikato because the beautiful harbour is also safe and sheltered. Plus, there was already a large Maori population here, and there were people, missionaries, looking for those noble savages that they could help civilise. The first Europeans to settle here were the Reverend James Wallace and his wife, Mary Ann. They were welcomed by the locals, who helped them build a house and a church. The Māori here already had had some contact with Europeans from around the Waikato and were already using European crops and methods. James and Mary Ann were great at their job, and they baptised many important chiefs in the area, and they set up a missionary school. Their mission station became a hub of activity with the church, the school, the houses and a mill, and Māori started attending services regularly. They started attracting more Europeans to the area, and because they already had an integrated relationship with local Māori community, this laid the foundation for assimilation. This is something I'm going to get into later on in other videos. Join me for those. So it wasn't long before Māori land started to become British land, through all different types of ways. Some fair, some not so much. The story of land ownership in New Zealand is complex and full of controversy. For Raglan, it started in the 1850s, where the British government purchased a whole packet of land intended for European settlement. Now, I use purchase this way because it's not as straightforward as it might seem. You see, the British government had worked out a deal whereby they had preemption. Māori, if they wanted to sell land, had to sell it to the Crown. Then the Crown would then work out prices and deals that were favourable to them. Then the Crown would go and parcel out that land to European settlers, again in prices and deals that were favourable to them, and which didn't necessarily take into account Māori interests or needs. And of course, at the time, we're still dealing with translation issues, and you can't actually translate some Māori concepts directly into English and vice versa, because the worldviews are different. So sometimes people just had these great misunderstandings about what actually sale and purchase of land really meant. Understandably, this built up a lot of ill will and mistrust between the two communities, and it was something that bubbled under the surface continually for generations. But meanwhile, the Crown had their land, and so they parcelled it out to European settlers and named the township Raglan, after a British lord who had fought in the Crimean War and had never set foot in this country. There is no evidence to suggest he even got anywhere near the southern hemisphere at all. And so Raglan became the name of the town, and it was a town that grew slowly but steadily. Immigrant cottages were built. Early industry included flax and timber exports, eventually transitioning to farming, which became the backbone of Raglan's economy well into the 20th century. Suburban expansion in the mid-1900s kicked off residential development, a lot of it geared towards holiday homes. Since infrastructure like telephone lines and mains electricity was gradually modernising Raglan, but meanwhile that conflict around land ownership was still bubbling underneath. A deeply painful part of Raglan's history is the struggle over this piece of land, which was seized by the government for important military purposes during World War II. This land had been part of a long-standing and thriving papakainga, a communal village for Ngāti Māhanga, home to families who lived sustainably from the river, sea and gardens. They had a meeting house here, and they had an urupa cemetery, which shows you just how significant culturally and spiritually this land is. In the lead up to World War II, the New Zealand government decided they absolutely needed an emergency landing strip, and it had to be somewhere between New Plymouth and Auckland, and it was necessary for defence and for postal services. This piece of land was chosen, even though Māori were living here. In 1940, the government invoked its Public Works Act and the bulldozers moved in. 89 acres were cleared, including homes and community lifelines, to the river, their sources of food and income. No warning and nowhere else to go. Returning veterans, Māori soldiers who had served in the war, returned to find that their land was gone, their papakainga destroyed. They were rightfully angry, and one man, Hami Kere Opa, Sam, he let his anger be known. He stood up for himself and defended his land fiercely. He patrolled his land fully armed, making sure nobody else could come and take away the little that was remaining. The government had promised to give back the land after the war, but they didn't. They actually decided just to hang on to it for a while, you know, never know when it might come in handy. They gave the land to the Raglan City Council. It had never been a secret that this was Māori land, but the City Council decided they had ownership now. And in the 1960s, they actually gave it to the Raglan Golf Club to build a golf course. Yep, a 9-hole golf course on what was once a papakainga, and it held an urupa, a cemetery. For many Māori, this widespread loss of land was too much, and it led to displacement, with people moving away to the urban areas like Hamilton or Auckland, meaning they not only lost touch with their land, but they lost touch with their identity and their ancestry. One woman who would not let go was a woman who became known as Eva Rickard. Remember Hami? Well, his sister was also a powerhouse when it came to holding on to their land and resisting those that were trying to control it. Her name was Tua Iwa, and she had all the strength and might of her ancestors. Inspired, she took up the mantle of leadership in this area. And from the 1970s onwards, she became a well-known name in local circles. And then she became a powerhouse in national circles, this time going under the name of Eva Rickard. Eva wasn't impressed with people playing sport on sacred land, so she said so, loud and clear. Her approach was fearless and public. In 1976, she fenced off the area that was the urupa, the burial ground, inside the golf course, and performed karakia, prayers. A few years later, she was arrested in 1978 when her and 16 others trespassed on the golf course during a golf tournament. Of course, they didn't consider it trespassing. This was their ancestral land. The event made national media, highlighting the ongoing struggle for justice over Māori land confiscation. His activism wasn't confined to just this piece of land. She made sure Māori throughout the country could have their say. She was a strong advocate for women's rights within Māoridom and encouraged other female activists to ignore traditional Māori protocol, calling for women to speak at official Māori gatherings, including on the marae. Eva's fight continued down the matriarchal bloodline, and her daughter, Angeline Greensill, still fights for rights today. She adds her legal expertise to the protest. Angeline was strongly involved in the legal negotiations that did eventually lead to parts of the new Raglan airfield being returned to the people, to the iwi. She also took part in environmental campaigns and other Māori land occupations. Their story is one of resilience and determination against a backdrop of historic injustice. And it's a story typical of many communities in New Zealand, not just Raglan. So honestly, I was a bit sad not to see more of their story in the Raglan Museum. In the museum, while there was that beautiful photo and a little plaque dedicated to her, I didn't see as much information as I would have hoped for. There was a QR code, but when I clicked on that, it said site no longer available. So now, according to the lady at the museum, there's supposed to be a community skills centre down here, some memorials to Kupe and others. I can't find them. I've driven up and down the street, or should I say road actually. It takes you out to some really nice little public access parts of the beach. There is a school here, there is also a community campsite, and there is a marae, but of course I don't want to go in and film there because those are people's private spaces. Today, Raglan is best known by travellers as a vibrant, laid-back surfing town with stunning natural beauty and strong creative vibe. Its claim to fame is Manu Bay, drawing surfers from around the globe eager to ride waves famously featured in the classic film Endless Summer. But for me, this summer day is ending, and as the sun goes down, I am heading off to Hamilton, just along the road. A vibrant little city which I have been told has an amazing green space. I hope you'll join me there. Until then, happy travels everyone!